Every now and then, a new writer will emerge in the comic book industry that takes the world by storm. And in the 2010s, that was Tom King. With an intriguing background as an ex CIA agent and a writing style that stood out at the time, King was the darling of critics and fans alike. Fast forward a few years, and the reception towards Tom King is decidedly a bit more mixed. He isn't universally hated by any means, but people have become a bit wary of what he'll do next. For the longest time, there was a belief that King let his thoughts on certain matters like mental health bleed into his work, which was interesting at first but became slightly repetitive later on, especially when his characters started acting out in unfavorable ways due to their mental issues. So, I wanted to talk about some of his work, focusing exclusively on his limited series. While he has written longer runs and one-shots, the Tom King miniseries is almost its entire genre at this point, and can be given separate attention. For clarity, these will be brief thoughts on the books I have read, so there are a few titles missing from the discussion. Additionally, I won't go over these titles in depth. I will just briefly talk about the work and how I feel about it overall. While readers had probably heard of Tom King before this owing to his work on Grayson and Omega Men, this title is probably what caused most of them to really take notice of his work. The plot involves the android superhero Vision creating his own family and trying to live a normal life in the suburbs. And just like any story set in the suburbs that isn't a sitcom, the feces fly into the fan fairly quickly. The story is really well written, and in a vacuum, I would consider that quite excellent. However, comic book stories are rarely consumable in a vacuum, especially this one, considering Vision's daughter Viv becomes a character in the Marvel Universe after this. And the truth is, after the actions Vision commits in this story, and was willing to commit as well, it is hard to not look at the character in a whole new light. The story indirectly wants us to forgive him, constantly reminding us that the Vision has saved the world multiple times. But is that enough to look past his actions in this? When people think of the definitive Tom King miniseries, Mr. Miracle is probably the one they are thinking of. After an attempt on his life, Scott Free, aka Mr. Miracle, has to balance his life on Earth with his wife Big Barda, while the two also play their roles in the constant conflict between the warring planets of New Genesis and Apocalypse. I have no hesitation in proclaiming the first 11 issues of this series as some of the best comics I have ever read in my life. Unfortunately, issue 12 does sour some of that goodwill for me. As a matter of fact, on my first read of the issue, I felt it had retroactively ruined the whole series. While I do not feel as strongly now, I still have problems with how Mr. Miracle ends. In the penultimate issue, it is revealed that everything Scott has gone through was a result of him succumbing to the anti-life equation after the attempt on his life, and he has seemingly broken free after killing Darkseid. However, Scott instead chooses to live in the world that the anti-life equation made for him, which has disturbing undertones of telling people it might be okay to prefer a delusion where they are happy as opposed to facing a reality in which they are not. Now, the twist that this was all in Scott's head makes sense, adding context to the scenes with Granny Goodness and Orion, as this is the way Scott sees or wants to see them. But the underlying implications of the final issue still make me a bit uneasy. I almost didn't add this one, as despite what King's intent for this series was, in the end it got away from him as the solicitations for this series would constantly change and not match the content within the issues, which is a clear sign of editorial tampering. Heroes in Crisis is a story about the events taking place in Sanctuary, a secret location where heroes and a few villains can mentally process whatever is going on in their lives. That sounds intriguing, but the events that actually happen involve the mass murder of a bunch of C and D-list characters at the hands of Wally West, who is clearly written in a manner meant to demonize the character. While I cannot say with certainty that this would have been well received if King stuck to his original plan, there are some things in the story that are just bizarre, both writing and art-wise. It almost feels that the story was written with an agenda in mind. I'm not throwing out accusations, but at the same time I'm writing this script, former editor Dan DiDio has penned a story about how Nightwing should have died in Infinite Crisis, as that would have made everything better for everyone. And he's also no fan of Wally. Strange Adventures is the story of Adam Strange and his wife Alana balancing their life on Earth with the responsibilities to Alana's home planet of Ran, which has just survived a devastating war. If that sounds vaguely similar, it shouldn't come as a surprise that Strange Adventures does seem to follow the beats of his predecessor Mr. Miracle, at least on a superficial level. This, combined with the poor reception of Heroes in Crisis and his Batman run, led to Strange Adventures being less well received. Personally, Strange Adventures is fine. The darker take on Adam Strange is not a novel idea, going all the way back to Alan Moore's Swamp Thing, and King does reveal some information about the plot a little too early, which hurts the mystery element of it, as the reader is left wanting to confirm something they have already figured out, which is that Adam isn't telling the truth, and want to know how much of what he's saying is a lie, and how much does his wife Alana know. Naturally, this also portrays Adam Strange in quite a negative light. However, as this does not appear to be in continuity, I do not mind it as much. Years after the squid attack on Manhattan that took place in the pages of Watchmen, a new Rorschach and his female sidekick attempt to assassinate a presidential candidate, but are foiled before doing so. However, the detective looking into the incident discovers there's more than meets the eye and uncovers a vast conspiracy that seemingly has far-reaching consequences. In my opinion, this is by far Tom King's best work to date. While the fact that this is technically a sequel to Watchmen would put off some people, as it did me for the longest time, eventually I gave it a chance and found it to be a psychological thriller that examines why and how conspiracy theories end up developing, and the mindsets of the people that embrace them. I don't want to go into too much detail, as this is a book I have no hesitation in recommending and will advise people to seek out actively. As for the Watchmen elements, while reading Watchmen provides context to certain events, like the fact that the squid was created by Ozymandias, there aren't that many overt connections to Watchmen. In fact, with a little tweaking, Rorschach and his sidekick could have easily been dressed as Frank Miller's Batman and Carrie Kelly in another universe, and considering that the man himself appears in the story, I don't think he would have minded. On an alien planet far, far away, the family of a young girl is murdered and she seeks to avenge them by hunting their killer. However, as she is unable to do so herself, she needs a champion, and Supergirl just happens to be celebrating her 21st birthday on her planet. This is another excellent story and serves as a celebration of Supergirl's history, with elements that have been tied to her in the past showing up as meaningful cameos throughout. However, it is also a character piece both for Kara and the young girl she ends up traveling with, Rutai. Again, I have no issues in recommending this story as King doesn't end up derailing Supergirl's character in a darker direction for the plot. While Kara is jaded, we are shown exactly why, and more importantly, it doesn't stop her from being the hero she is. Now, apparently, Tom King loosely bases the plot of this comic on a novel called True Grit. However, I haven't read said novel yet, so I cannot compare the two, but from what I have seen from other people online, there are some structural similarities. I have to point out that mentor-mentee stories are extremely common throughout all forms of fiction, and the celebration of Supergirl's history are still very genuine. This is another mystery story that King wrote, which involves the human target, aka Christopher Chance, getting fatally poisoned after a botched assassination attempt on Lex Luthor, with the suspects being the former members of the Justice League International. This is a comic that I struggle with the most, and out of all of these, my opinion on it has flip-flopped drastically on when I'm reading it, what I'm eating afterwards, and the side of the bed I'm sleeping on that night. It's a novel concept using the JLI as characters in a noir thriller, with Ice as the femme fatale, Guy Gardner as the corrupt cop, Nord as the well-meaning but bumbling friend on the force, and Chance himself playing the role of the hard-boiled detective that smooches dames and punches goons, bends the rules but has a moral code. There's also a fantastic issue that is meant to be the Batman-focused one, but the entire issue is spent with our main characters being paranoid about him showing up, and it is excellent. It might be the best Batman story King has ever written, the one in which he doesn't show up at all. But my main issue is how King uses his knowledge of continuity. Namely, that he picks and chooses which parts of continuity to use. Again, he did it in his other comics too, but the way he uses it is a bit more sinister in this one. Let's take Ice as an example. Her being killed by the Overmaster in the pages of the JLI is the driving force of the comic, but her backstory is actually the one from the maxi series Generation Lost, which retconned her to have a more problematic backstory about her people being thieves. Adding this element only serves to make Ice a little darker personality-wise and hints at there being more to her than her sweet and nice personality. There are other examples where King didn't seem to care enough, like the Rocket Red issue, which involves a rambling list of Russian stereotypes, and it's not even clear that it is Dmitry Pushkin, which would be a big deal as he was also dead and is seemingly alive now for some reason in this story, or where he alters a pre-existing relationship to make it seem darker on the surface, like Fire and John having a sexual relationship, which isn't out of the realm of possibility as the two have always been close, but their relationship is treated like an affair, despite John's wife and kid being long dead even before he came to Earth. The last one seemingly only exists to fulfill the trope of someone having an affair in a noir story, and nothing else, and frankly fails miserably, as I can't see why any reader would really think their relationship needed to be an affair. As I still can't reach a consensus on this one, it's best to move on to the next. I do not like this one. I do not like this one at all. Tom King gives us a story set in the unique period of the early days of Batman, where his rogues plan a heist and it all goes smoothly. Of course not. It goes as well as driving a truck off a cliff would go. Now, There are things I like, including the battle between the mooks and the surprise villain that shows up, which actually makes the title quite clever. But the story was a slog to get through, not helped by King deciding to overcomplicate the story with needless purple prose and references, as well as a liberal dose of in medias res with too many time jumps. King also takes the time to introduce two original characters, the Help, who is Prometheus in every way but design. Seriously, he's even defeated by Catwoman in his first appearance, just like Prometheus, and Nuri Espinosa, aka Agent. An FBI agent reduced to a joke about being only capable of swearing. Characters that only King has used, as they only show up in The Penguin, also written by him, and not being covered in this video because it's too recent. I know a lot of people like this story, but there are better stories with these characters, concepts, and even style, so this one just didn't work for me. We actually end on a good note with Gotham City Year 1. Years ago, Gotham City was an amazing city to be in compared to what it would become today. Unfortunately, the kidnapping of the heiress to the Wayne fortune leads to a domino effect that peaks beneath the shiny exterior, with Private Detective Slam Bradley caught in the crossfire. Once again, King delivers a solid noir story set in the past of the city that would eventually get so bad it would need a Batman to protect it. Also, once again, King writes another excellent story that is peripherally about Batman, but does not directly involve him. The story does a good job of showing how a formerly great city eventually lost its way, while showing that it might not have been as great in the past as we thought it was. The protagonist Slam Bradley does react more than act, but that is by design, and the story paints all the characters in it as morally ambiguous, well, almost all of them. Again, I can't go into much detail without spoiling the story, especially since this one is relatively recent, but I enjoyed my time in the first year of Gotham City, even if the characters in the story certainly didn't. As you can see, my reaction to Tom King's various miniseries is very mixed. It is also extremely important to mention that King has worked with fantastic artists who have helped bring his vision to life and always seem to bring their A game. Yes, that also includes Clay Mann on Heroes in Crisis. Despite the flaws in some of them, I remain curious whenever a new King mini is announced, as it has the potential to be the best thing I've ever read, or something that makes me want to tear the hair off my head in frustration. And in certain cases, it could be both.